NHL 23 is done. I mean, technically there's still like a month left, but it's over. I thought it was time to finish off the No Money Spent series by breaking down the things I learned in my first year of spending no money on a team. So for everyone that has stuck through from episode 1 all the way to episode 78, God, I need a life. Let's talk about everything we learned and everything that we're going to implement in NHL 24. Let's get into it. Let's start by recapping the squad that we ended up with. And there are a few things that you need to remember. One, I made it a goal to make a Master Set player from every event, starting essentially in January. And as we're going to talk about the things that I want to focus on for NHL 24, doing that is definitely not one of them. Because as the season went along, it definitely hurt my ability to focus on the Master Set players that I really wanted that offered a ton of upside. For example, the Hut Millennium event, while I did take advantage of a lot of the cards that were available, there was also a bunch of events that I made Master Set players for that I just wouldn't have if that wasn't a goal of the series. Connor McDavid's Team of the Year card remains one of the safest cards that you can invest in because no matter what, he is going to force his way to 99 or the highest overall that they're going to allow. So going to next year, that is still going to be a heavy focus of mine, is acquiring Connor McDavid's Team of the Year card. As was Team Builders. Something that I didn't really put a focus on until about 3/4 of the way through the year was actually collecting Team Builders. Now, I only got to use Eric Stahl for a handful of games, but Jaromir Jagr's card was one of the best I used all season long. And because of how they work up until the high 90s, by just saving your rewards that you would probably cash in for whatever random event that comes throughout the year, Team Builders allow you to acquire some of the best cards throughout the game, and it's a lot easier than I anticipated early on when I started my No Money Spent run. Team of the season. We're going to talk about this in a little bit more in depth, but man, this year was definitely a kick right in the pills. First of all, the card art was absolutely brutal. Secondly, they took forever to upgrade all of the Team of the Season cards. In prior years, we pretty much got +1 or +2 every single month. Meanwhile, this year, a lot of the Team of the Season cards were just forgotten about for months all the way into the summer. So being careful about what Team of the Season cards to go after in next year's game is definitely going to be a focus of mine. The other focus, especially on defense, is even for Master Set player cards that you really don't have that much of an attachment to, like Mark Stahl, for example, paying less attention to the player attributes and more attention to the actual abilities that a card has is definitely going to be one of my biggest focuses in NHL 24, especially on defense. There were many defensemen throughout the year that weren't exactly the fastest. However, Truculent, Shutdown, and a few other abilities made them usable for months. And I find that they have a lot more usefulness on defense than on offense when it comes to attributes versus abilities. There are still a ton of overpowered and extremely useful abilities on offense, but you can hide a lower overall card on defense that has a very, very good ability much easier. And lastly, goaltending. This year, I've stated throughout the entire season that goaltending was the worst that it's ever been, and it led to NHL 23 being one of the worst NHL games we've ever got. Goaltending is always going to be such a hard focus for players because you essentially can't really control them, meaning that you are just banking on a computer-controlled player to bail you out. And I've always stated that goaltending isn't really going to make you a better player. It might steal you a game here or there, but your defense and how you play the game is going to be far more impactful than any goaltender card. That being said, I'm going to find a goaltender that I'm confident in. It doesn't need to perform great, but I just need to believe that it's going to perform half decent. All right, let's get into a few things that I'm going to focus on for NHL 24. Starting off, number one is starting early. Now, this might be kind of redundant and extremely obvious, but I really didn't start paying attention to my No Money Spent team until about January. I would dabble, play a few games every week to get some rewards, but I still played my God Squad a majority of the time. And for a lot of people that don't have the ability to play multiple consoles or multiple accounts, putting a heavy focus on No Money Spent from start to finish is a gigantic advantage. On top of that, saving up for future events is definitely an extremely good play. So if you are new to NHL this year, there are essentially 3 events that are the marquee Hockey Ultimate Team events. And now they could be completely changed in NHL 24. The odds of content changing a ton is very, very minimal, however. Starting first with Fantasy Hockey. Now, this is my favorite event all season long, simply because EA has no control over it. Even this year, when they released Master Set players that were not really all that sought after and exciting, and they did their damnedest to start them out as low as possible. Every time they score in real life, they go up overalls, and there's really no way for EA to do anything about it once they're out in the wild. Defensemen, they get +2 for every goal, and forwards get a +1. Goaltenders get a +1 for every win, but they still remain to be not really all that valuable when it comes to the fantasy hockey event. The issue with the fantasy hockey event is that it is early on in the season, as it should be. But the problem is that you really can't go after multiple of these cards if you're no money spent, because the resources required to make them, combine that with the fact that they're lower overall and you're really not going to be able to take advantage of them until they blow up, hopefully, in the real game. There is a lot of risk involved. However, doing everything you can to hoard all of the rewards and things you get until the fantasy hockey event is definitely one of the best plays. For example, one of my favorite cards throughout my entire time playing this game was the fantasy hockey Cam Fowler. Master set players from the events obviously can be made, and there's always a few that are worth making that are safe, but Cam Fowler started out in the low 80s, but he was 6'2", 215 with decent skating, meaning that the earlier you can get them in your lineup, the far higher advantage you have, because if they start scoring some goals, you're laughing. So putting a focus on cards that at least have decent skating from this event is definitely a thing I want to pay attention to next year. On top of that, trusting your gut. If you are an avid hockey fan, you watch a lot of the NHL, maybe a specific team, and they release a card that many of the player base really doesn't pay attention to, you can definitely take advantage of their card early on. For example, Pavel Mintyukov. You guys have been following my channel. I'm a big Ice Dog fan. I've seen Pavel Mintyukov light up the Ice Dogs for 2 years now. And I know that in the OHL, when it comes to offensive defensemen, the entire play runs through them, meaning that they are going to have a huge advantage at scoring because of the league that they play in. Pavel Mintyukov at 6'3", 195 ended up being one of the best fantasy hockey cards simply because he hit 99 very quickly and he was already big. Combine that with some of the best abilities and truculence and you're laughing. This card was fantastic.
He is going to blow up the OHL this season though, so this actually might be one of the safer ones.
So going into next year, I'm going to put a focus on investing in some of these non-master set event fantasy hockey cards. Now, one of my potentially biggest regrets is not taking advantage of the free master set player that EA offered pretty much every event throughout the year. Essentially, every single event, they offered some way for you to earn event collectibles that usually equaled out to the value of creating a master set player. However, because I have the attention span of a squirrel, I essentially rushed out, sold most of my collection to get whatever the new hotness was, and then when I did unlock some of those event collectibles from the objectives, I would just turn them into other cards and then use them for future events. And while that's not a terrible way to go about it, I basically gave up free master set players and burned half of my collection every 2 weeks. So what I will be doing this year is putting a focus on actually getting the master set players and the high-end cards that EA does offer. It's not like there's a ton of them, but they usually do offer one throughout every event, which means that I will try to grind out as quick as possible with whatever the new objectives are. Objectives 2.0 looks very promising in Hockey Ultimate Team, making the content much more engaging. So I'm hoping this is a lot more fun than just throw as many of whatever event card into your lineup and play rookie squad battles at 2 minutes. Next, work the market. All right, this is something that I have struggled with my entire time as a creator for Hockey Ultimate Team, simply because I don't have the patience for it. And usually, I have a God Squad in which I dump a ton of money in because I want to show off the best and highest cards at all times. Now, to be clear, if you really want to work the market in Hockey Ultimate Team, it's going to require a ton of time. Other games have the ability to make quick money on the auction house. In NHL, it is definitely viable and an easy thing to do, but it requires a lot more time because the margins aren't nearly as big, especially early on. Now, with cross-marketplace becoming a thing in NHL 24, that is going to open up a whole new world of being able to flip cards and work the market because there is essentially double the items on the market. One of the most effective ways to make a ton of coins in NHL is getting to the highest tier to which you can afford the most expensive card in the game. Here is what I mean. Over the last few seasons, Gretzky and Lemieux cards have been the most sought after, simply because they are extremely rare, they're usually extremely powerful, and they're very hard to obtain. Which means that at the launch of the game, they usually settle in at about 1 to 1.5 million coin, which is a gigantic amount, especially for the casual no money spent player. However, if you put a focus on coins over building your collection and other things like that early on in HUT, and getting to that 1 million coin base level as quick as possible, your margins for flipping are huge. Because once you can afford the most expensive card and you keep that amount of coins in your back pocket, you're no longer having to flip lower overall base cards that are essentially just used for team builders where the margins are around 500 to 1,000 coins. You can now flip the big boys, meaning that you see a Mario Lemieux at 1 in the morning go up on the auction house and you're chilling on your couch, maybe you don't feel like going to bed just yet, and that Mario Lemieux is just sitting there for $1 million, when you know damn well that by 3 p.m. the next day, you could sell that thing for 1.5 if you've got a little patience. Now, instead of sitting there for an hour and flipping a ton of cards to try and get, 50 to 100,000 coins, you're now able to make 500,000 coins in a much faster manner. So going into NHL 24 for no money spent, I will be taking tradable rewards or things that will guarantee me coins as fast as possible early on, foregoing the gigantic collection and trying to get whatever the most high-rated cards are early. Next up, team builders. This was probably my biggest mistake early on in no money spent, because when you're no money spent, every reward that you get is that much more meaningful, meaning that you can use it towards whatever the new master set players are. You can trade them in and things like that. Cards are currency, and that includes low base cards that come out at the beginning of the game. However, if you play the game weekly, meaning that you are ripping Rivals packs or Squad Battles packs every single week, you are getting enough of those base cards where if you just don't sell them, and you just put them into your collection slowly but surely, after about 3 to 4 weeks of just playing the game casually, let's say 5 to 10 hours a week. And my God, that is what casual means in 2023 when it comes to video games. Like, that's considered playing the game casually. 2023 is a time. If you collect all of those cards, you can make the team builders pretty easily. And again, especially if you take Rivals and untradeable rewards, assuming the reward structure is the same, you're doubling the amount of cards that you get every week, and you can really hammer out those team builders very quick. Then once you get a little bit closer, you can buy and finish off the teams that you're missing and get those team builder cards. The past 2 years, team builder cards have been the best cards in the game. Now, as they get into the high 90s, they lose a lot of their value, like trading in 2 98s for a 99, which is just bonkers. But at the beginning, like trading 289s in for a jacked up 92 that has unbelievable abilities, we're talking. So while I am trying to acquire as many coins as I possibly can, base NHL cards that range from 74 to 82, again, if the structure works the same, I will be hoarding to try and complete team builders. Next up, X Factors. Again, assuming X Factors work the same in NHL 24, I always fall into the trap of getting a bunch of X Factors that are fantastic early on in the game, only to then recycle them all the way down, and I've basically wasted half my resource. What I will do is if there is a player that I like in real life, I'm going to utilize those players far more. I think that's something we've fallen victim to when playing Ultimate Team Mode games, is that we require the best, the meta, whatever is deemed the most competitive cards, and we completely ignore players that we just love to watch in real life. Going into NHL 24, I will be utilizing as many players that I actually enjoy watching in real life, and I'm going to make that my mission when it comes to my content, to make sure that you guys are utilizing that as your first pillar of making your teams. However, when it does come to X Factors, there's always a few early on. It's usually the ones that have the highest skating, Matthew Barzal, Dylan Larkin, for example, that are fantastic early on. They hit a point, though, however, in which they don't receive upgrades, or other X Factors receive master set items that you can trade in, and they just kind of fall by the wayside. So early on, for example, Connor McDavid, I will be doing everything I can to get Connor McDavid's X Factor, because I know at some point he is either going to get a Team of the Year or a Team of the Season card, meaning that while it is expensive upgrading Connor McDavid, he's going to be one of the best cards in the game, if not the best card, while I'm leveling him up. I also know that at some point he is going to get a card that I can trade in that will automatically upgrade like Team of the Year and Team of the Season. So while I may pack a Matthew Barzal or Dylan Larkin in NHL 24 early on, I will not upgrade them and I will not put an investment in them, because I will save all of my power-up collectibles for cards that I know I will get value for in return. And again, I don't blame anyone for doing that. It is just something I'm going to focus on, because wasting resources and no money spent is 10 times worse than someone who spends a lot of money on the game. And then Team of the Year and Team of the Season. Like I mentioned, there are 3 events, really 3 marquee events that happen throughout the year in a Hockey Ultimate Team cycle, and if things stay the same, it's Fantasy Hockey. Then there's Team of the Year, which launches around January 1st, and it highlights the 6 best players, 2 defensemen, a goaltender, and 3 forwards for that calendar year. And usually a few of them are predictive, like Connor McDavid, for example. And then finally, we have Team of the Season, which is the beginning of the end of the HUT cycle, where you get these cards that will upgrade automatically, every time they receive a primetime or a team of the week, they will go up to match the highest overall that is out there, and they receive a team of the season card for great seasons throughout the entire campaign in real life. Team of the season this year was an extremely big letdown, like I mentioned when going over my team, and I don't know if I'm going to still put a heavy focus on saving my resources for that event anymore. While obviously getting cards that will upgrade throughout the year for free is fantastic, you are then putting all of your eggs in the EA basket that they are going to actually upgrade them. And as we saw in NHL 23, not the case. I mean, Steven Stamkos sat for like months without a new card. So I don't want to fall into that trap. And I also know that come the end game, they start releasing Master Set player items that have unbelievable abilities, and they're almost already maxed out in skating and shot and everything that's important anyways. So I'm going to be much more careful when it comes to Team of the Season. Now, Team of the Year, again, Connor McDavid's X Factor, if it does work and you are allowed to trade in the highest rated X Factor for Connor McDavid for his Team of the Year card, that is something I'm definitely going to do. And when it comes to the other positions, once we get closer to the event, we'll be able to make a decision on it. But those are usually pretty safe cards to go after. And Team of the Year cards are such an advantage when they come out because they get +3 to synergies. They've also got a slew of the best abilities in game. They just have such an advantage at the launch of that event that is still going to be a heavy focus of mine. So again, I want to thank everyone who has sat through 78 episodes of me grinding no money spent. We've won some games. We've lost a lot more. We've learned a lot about ourselves. But most importantly, we didn't spend a dime. So I hope everyone did enjoy the series in NHL 23. I can't wait to get started on day 1 for NHL 24. Thank you guys again for watching. I'll see you next year.